To do is to please silence your cell phones. The one thing that we don't want is to have cell phones ringing while our speakers are talking. We have a great lineup of speakers, and we want to hear everything they have to say. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. My name is Wachs. I'm the president of the Humans of Florida Association, and I'm thrilled to have everybody here. If you haven't seen the schedule, we have an incredible lineup of speakers today and tomorrow who are going to wow you with some incredible talks. I am so looking forward to hearing them. Our first speaker today is our keynote speaker, and I feel like this is poking me in the face, but I don't know if there's anybody in the humanist atheist movement that doesn't know Rebecca Watson. Rebecca is one amazing woman. She is the fearless leader of the Skeptics. She also helps with the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. With 4 words, she got one of the most important conversations in the atheist humanist movement going about 2 years ago. For those of you who have been totally unaware, those 4 words were, "Guys, don't do that." This got a conversation going simply about respect. Respect for boundaries, respect for women, respect for how we need to understand one another as people. This conversation exploded on the internet into real life and has just gotten out of control. What has happened is despicable. Rebecca has been hounded with threats of rape, threats that she's going to be killed. This woman has put up with so much that I don't know how she tolerates it. I have so much respect for her. She has become my hero, and I don't have heroes. I can't begin to tell you how much I admire this woman. As some of you may know, I have put up with my own firestorm in Florida, and I've been called the Rebecca Watson of Florida. I have, in my time as an activist, crawled up into a little ball in tears in my house saying enough. And what I put up with is 1/1,000,000th of what this woman has withstood. So it's amazing to me to watch her put up with what she does with amazing dignity, grace, and honor that she has. So I cannot wait to hear what she has to say to us today. Please give a huge round of applause to our keynote speaker, Rebecca Wachs. without a doubt the nicest introduction anyone has ever given me. And something Ellen Beth said inspired PZ to say something that I would like to take further, which is the idea of franchise opportunities to be the Rebecca Watson of various states. So we've got Florida, we've got New York down, so if any of you are from other states want to take it on, let me know. I'm very honored to be the keynote speaker today, and I'm very impressed that all of you are awake. It's 9 in the morning on a Saturday. I appreciate you being here. Elizabeth originally asked me to speak about harassment and about feminism and humanism and atheism, how all that ties together. And I was really nervous at first because she originally suggested that I give the talk tonight during the awards dinner. And if there's one thing my mother taught me, it was never tell people about your rape threats at the dinner table. Not polite. Although, I suppose if there's two things my mother's taught me, it's don't tell people your rape threats at the dinner table, and don't do that to your hair. You are 32 years old. So, I never really listened that much to her anyway. So, when I first started Skeptic in about 2005, it was to sell cheeky pinup calendars that would raise money to send women to Skeptics events, particularly the Amazing Meeting in Las Vegas. And when the calendars were made available for pre-order, I got in touch with Michael Shermer, and I asked if there was any way that he could help me promote them. And he was very kind, and he gave me some space in eSkeptic, the email newsletter he runs, for me to describe what the project was and encourage people to support it. Within about 10 minutes of that email going out, I got an email from a man I didn't know, and the email simply called me a cunt. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to say a lot of awful things today. Some of them may be triggering if you have experience with bullying and harassment and rape and things like that. So if you think those things might be a problem, you may want to leave. I apologize in advance. So yeah, I got this email calling me a cunt, and I responded in my trademark way, which is actually to be, it was actually to be really over-the-top nice. I responded with something like, "Thank you so much for your feedback. I will take that into consideration during future projects." And he immediately responded and said that if he lived closer to Boston, he would put a bullet in my brain. Those are his literal words, put a bullet in my brain. So I looked at the email headers, I got his IP address, and I looked it up and found that he was in a town in North Carolina. So I contacted the local police department in that town, and I explained what the email said, and I said, can I forward this to you for you to pursue? And they told me, no, we can't do anything about that. You should get in touch with your local police department. So I said, okay. So I got in touch with the Brookline, Massachusetts Police Department and explained everything to them. And they said, well, what we can do is we can put this complaint in a file, and then if he does anything, we'll have that file. So if someone did put a bullet in my brain, they could look at the file and they could say, maybe it's that guy. Now, as an atheist, I've never really had much interest in post-death retribution, so that didn't really mean a whole lot to me. And years after this event, I actually saw a Law and Order episode about a girl who gets an email threat from a guy she doesn't know, and the cops say there's nothing we can do about it until he actually does something, and then he kills her. Thanks, Law and Order. That was fun to watch. So no, what all I could do was go and get a post office box so that when I sent out the calendars, they didn't have my own address on the return envelope. And then hope that this man wasn't serious. He wasn't, apparently. Or if he was, he sure takes his time. But the lesson I learned almost immediately upon stepping into the spotlight was that the spotlight is really scary, and the police will not help me. That was the first lesson I learned. Within the year of starting Skeptic, I had my own stalker. The twist was that my stalker was a woman, and I had no idea how to handle that because everything I knew about stalkers came from Lifetime original movies about a woman, usually Family Ties, Meredith Baxter Burney, escaping a domineering boyfriend or husband, such as in the classics Mother May I Sleep with Danger, Till Lies Do Us Part, My Baby is Missing, and Beyond the Prairie, the true story of Laura Ingalls Wilder. All of those are actual Lifetime original movies that I've seen. None of them were about an obsessive woman on another continent who was trying to ruin another woman's life, which is what I was dealing with. And try she did. She would spread malicious lies about me and contact whoever she saw I was dating, or if she thought I was dating someone by seeing pictures of us together on Facebook, for instance. She would get in touch and tell them what a whore I am, give them a list of people that she thought I had slept with. She even tried to get me disqualified from a contest where I was attempting to win my own public radio show, and the producers of that were great about it, actually, having to delete constant malicious attacks from her about what a slut I am on their forums. At one point, she even spent several months pretending to be a comedy writer named Steve in order to befriend a buddy of mine, only to eventually reveal herself and try to convince him that I was a whore. We had mutual friends, she and I, and at first they didn't believe me when I told them how obsessive and scary she was getting. They chalked it up to a personality difference that would eventually blow over, and so what I learned from that was that many people, even friends, will not believe me unless and until they are subject to the same type of harassment. This lesson was reinforced in the past year, as Ellen Beth hinted at, when I've been repeatedly called a liar for describing one specific example of a man behaving in a boneheaded way toward me, an example of something that I see all the time, and yet I'm told repeatedly that I am lying about it. I also learned from my female stalker that ignoring trolls does not make them go away. She was obsessed with me, and she didn't need any attention in order to continue that obsession. Though I ceased all contact with her, I did not answer any of her emails or messages. I did not answer her on forums or blogs. And in fact, I trained myself to avoid all places she frequented online. She persisted anyway for about 5 years before she found another target. In 2010, I watched a YouTube video in which an atheist claimed that male circumcision and female genital mutilation were almost exactly equivalent in terms of harm done. I recorded a response video in which I made it clear that I personally am against any and all forms of non-medical genital mutilation, including male circumcision. However, I wanted to clarify that female genital mutilation, as is performed on millions of girls, is much, much more invasive, more dangerous, and more debilitating than male circumcision. The response I received, primarily from atheist men, was overwhelming and astonishing. They called me a whore and a cunt. They suggested that I'd been drugged, violently raped, and killed. Previously, I'd received similar messages about my videos from angry Christians, Muslims, chiropractors, anybody who I was criticizing their life work. But in this case, I was clicking on these profiles with these other people sending me these death threats, and I was seeing the words they used to describe themselves, and those words were atheist, skeptic, humanist, yes, humanist. These people were subscribed to my friends' channels. They had favorited George Robb songs and Neil deGrasse Tyson videos. These were our people. I learned that bullies were not just teenage losers in their mother's basement. These were adults, and they weren't at church functions and alternative medicine conferences. They're at events like this. I learned that many people in our community are actually part of a thing called the men's rights movement, which is a loosely organized group of men who fight viciously against, and I quote, stupid whores, like myself. They believe that I and other feminists are attempting to destroy men, and they believe we should be silenced by any means necessary. And I learned that these people were part of my community. And all that was before, as Ellen Beth referenced, one of my heroes, Professor Richard Dawkins, publicly mocked me, suggesting that I have no right to ask the men of our community to respect women. Since then, I get emails and messages every single day from atheists and skeptics and self-labeled humanists telling me that I'm a bitch, a prude, a cunt, that I deserve to be raped, but I'm too ugly, that I should be murdered, that I talk too much and need a dick in my mouth. That one just came in yesterday. Last year, I was scheduled to speak at the Amazing Meeting in Las Vegas, and just before I was to attend, a man tweeted that he would be attending, and that if he ran into me, he would sexually assault me. The JREF, who organized the conference, allowed the man to come, and did absolutely nothing to make me feel safer. In fact, the man was even angrier at me by the time the conference rolled around, because by retweeting what he had said, my friends actually got him fired from his freelance writing job. So at the conference, all of the skeptic writers who were there instituted a buddy system in which we always traveled together, or with a male escort, and especially when returning to hotel rooms late at night. So what I learned from that was that I can't rely upon the leaders of our movement to care or to actually take action to help. So I know that's all a bit depressing. This is a great way to start a conference, and that those lessons, you can't trust the cops, you can't trust people to believe your story, you can't trust the people who hang out with you at these events, you can't trust the leaders of our community to give a damn. There have been exceptions though, so brighten this up a little bit. For instance, recently I found that the FBI has been much more willing to listen to me than local police, though as of this moment, no one has been arrested for making threats on my life. But I've had friends and strangers alike who have never questioned my words when dealing with harassment. At events like this, I'm inundated with the best people in the world. Every time I give a talk, I meet so many amazing, wonderful people, while usually the online bullies are too frightened to talk to me. Can you blame them? And a few organization leaders have been fantastic, and I'll use this one as one example. I recently learned that another stalker of mine, a man who runs a blog and a Twitter account called Elevator Gate, lives in Florida, not too far from here. I got in touch with the humanists, and they listened to my concerns, and they said, you know, we're going to keep you safe. We're not going to let this person in. I thought that was an awesome response, and it's the reason why I'm here. Also, this past summer, can we get a round of applause for how awesome that was? Similarly, this past summer, I was in San Francisco doing a meet and greet with my podcast co-host, the SGU, and someone alerted me to the fact that, PZ actually alerted me to the fact that there was a person on a forum that was dedicated to hating me, and she was saying that she planned to attend the event in San Francisco, and that she planned to approach me and accost me in some way. I just forwarded the information to the event organizer, and they immediately took her name off the wait list. So there are organizers who do take these things seriously, some of them at least, not enough of them. About 4 years ago, I started giving talks about how feminism is integral to skepticism and atheism and humanism. And I did that mostly by highlighting the obvious areas of overlap between the two movements. The religious rights war on women, for example. With the exception of that video I did on female genital mutilation, the response was overwhelmingly positive. And in fact, in the case of the FGM video, the objections from atheists were actually not over whether or not FGM is wrong. They agreed with me on that, but over the simple fact that I said it's worse than what Western men believe has been done to them. But overall, the response skeptics and atheists have when I talk about these issues is positive. And I think that the reason why that is because I was showing very clear examples of the misogyny and sexism in cultures and communities that atheists feel separated from. They're not actually a part of those communities, so it's easy for atheists to accept the fact that religious people discriminate against women. We're us, they're them. We, humanists included, are happy with this understanding that we are smarter than them, we are better, we are more compassionate. And when I dared suggest otherwise, when I dared suggest that there were vestiges of misogyny amongst some atheists and skeptics, that's when they showed me exactly how misogynistic they could really be. And what I've learned from that is that religion didn't invent misogyny. Religion merely codified and sanctified misogyny. The two are separate but occasionally intertwined ideas, both of which are harmful to the continued progress of the human race, and both of which we as humanists should actively combat. Like religion, misogyny is ingrained in our culture, so ingrained that we gave its root cause a name, the patriarchy, the rule of men over women. Children are born into it, they grow up with it, they operate under its influence, and only rarely do they actually question it. Both religion and patriarchy encourage women to blindly and happily accept their own imprisonment, keeping their sisters in line with the same words that their captors use, words like slut, whore, cunt, bitch, unladylike, which is a word that Todd Aiken recently used to put down his female opponent for Senate. Liz Winstead, the awesome feminist comedian, aptly responded, unladylike is the new uppity. Uppity being a word that has actually been applied to me several times in the last few years. So atheists shake their head and they wonder at the power of religion, how it convinces women in small African villages to hold down their own daughters as their genitals are sliced. What atheists need to know is that that is not religion. That is patriarchy. Female genital mutilation is not restricted to Muslim communities, and when asked why they do it, mutilators do sometimes say they do it for their religion, but more often they say that it is tradition, or that it's for modesty, cleanliness, controlling women's disgusting sexuality. That's not religion, that's patriarchy. It's the same patriarchy that convinces a woman to call her sister a slut in order to see her ruined. It's the same patriarchy that teaches a man that the solution to a mouthy woman is to terrorize her. And the way to terrorize her is to rape her. And if you can't do that, due to distance or impotence or cowardice, you can just threaten to rape her. And then you can joke about it, and you can threaten it again, and again, and again, 1,000 times over, until it's all she can think about, from the time she wakes up till the time she goes to bed. So that way she knows that she has no real control over her own body, her own freedom, her own sexuality, because she is a woman and he is a man. That is patriarchy. The similarities between patriarchy and religion don't end there. See what happens when we point out the patriarchy to those who are unknowingly influenced by it. We get denial, disinterest in examining the facts or in seeing the world from a new perspective, anger at the person who's pointing out the delusion. Both religion and patriarchy also deliver an overwhelming urge to silence detractors, using any means necessary. Humanists rightfully fight to stop the silencing of those who blaspheme against gods. But what about all those people who are blaspheming against less heavenly masters? In many countries, as you all know, I'm sure, the punishment for blasphemy is death. In Egypt 2 weeks ago, a 16-year-old girl was gunned down, supposedly because she spit at the strange man who was sexually harassing her on the street. She's dead because of her blasphemy, because she questioned the ultimate authority of man over woman, because she was not sufficiently ladylike. She wasn't quiet or nice. She wanted control over her own body. She wanted freedom from men on the street telling her what she was worth to them. Freedom from men who feel entitled to women's bodies, not because of any one religious text, but because they're told every single day by their parents, by their peers, their government, their media. They're told that that's just the way the world is. So that 16-year-old girl's name is Iman Mustafa, and I think she should be considered a martyr of the humanist cause, just as much as we consider Giordano Bruno, Pussy Riot, Hypatia, or Alexander Ahn martyrs of our cause. Last night at the fundraising dinner, for those who were here, you may remember that it was suggested that if humanist organizations were as well funded as churches, women would be treated equally to men. And I wonder if that's true. I think it would be nice if it were, but I'm not quite sure. In order for that to happen, you don't just have to get money. What you need to make that happen is an organization, and in fact, an entire movement that's unafraid to make a public statement affirming the equality of women and condemning the anti-feminist ideals of those who operate under the completely misleading name of the men's rights movement, who are no more subtle or clever than the white power movement, but who are somehow accepted by many skeptics and atheists and humanists. When every large organization in our movement is able to boldly affirm the rights and equality of women as a fundamental aspect of humanism, then maybe we can begin to move toward changing society for the better. In the past few months, some of you may know there's been a growing movement of people organizing as Atheist Plus. They're atheists who want to extend their atheism to what they see as the next logical step, which is working towards social justice. In other words, secular humanists. What I've realized, though, is that they don't know they're espousing humanistic thought. They think secular humanism encompasses people who are religious, and they don't think that secular humanism has anything to do with social justice. These people are people who should be here today, but they are completely ignorant of what secular humanism is. And I hate to tell you this, but it's not their fault. It's the fault of the large humanist organizations in this country that fail to properly market themselves and fail to take clear, bold stances without fear of alienating those who don't share our values. Too few large-scale humanist organizations in the US are willing to use the word atheist, for instance, or to affirm progressive feminist principles, despite the fact that these things have been integral to every secular humanist manifesto that's been written since 1933. If humanist organizations make it clear that they embrace those principles, those motivated, enthusiastic young activists will join this movement. And we need them to join this movement. We need to join forces with those who share common goals if we actually want to reach those goals. We need to help people realize that secular humanist organizations stand up for atheists and other non-believers, support the separation of church and state, fight for human rights, including the equality of women, and the right of all non-believers to be free from bullying and free from sexual harassment. The longer organizations continue to ignore the problem of atheist feminists who are being terrorized, the more women turn away from this community. Jen McCrite is one example. Until recently, she blogged at the very popular blog BlagHag. She's just one prominent example, but she's by far the only one. I know of at least 3 other women in the past month who have left the spotlight rather than deal with bullies. So the bullies are, in a way, winning. They've got a few wins under their belt. I mean, sadly for them, though, I'm still here. I don't have any plans to go anywhere. Because every time a woman steps down, I just get a little louder and a little more annoying, a little angrier to compensate. My haters say that I won't quit because I'm an attention whore. They're partly right. I'm an attention whore who hates to lose a fight. And so I'm going to keep on going, but I could really use your help. And what I need you to do is do things like call out misogyny both inside and outside this community, wherever you see it. Stand up against bullies who are harassing women online. Let a female writer or speaker or artist know that you appreciate and support her voice. And tell the organizations that represent you that you want them to take a stand for women. Because if they won't, we're going to find new organizations and a new movement that will. Thank you.
I have to say, this is the reason I wanted Rebecca to give the keynote for this conference. She articulated everything I wanted said for what's going on in the movement. And I'm sitting there just in the back of the room nodding my head. I want to thank you once again. Can we have another round of applause? So we're going to do a short question and answer session right now. So, do you want to run it?
Yeah, sure. And I'll try to repeat questions. Yeah.
You've been the subject of a lot of verbal abuse. Where do you think the line should be drawn with respect to legality? In other words, what kind of speech should not be free? What kind of speech should be outlawed? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Man, that's a giant can of worms, isn't it? For those who couldn't hear, he's asking what sort of speech I feel should be outlawed. Of course, you know, as a humanist and as a skeptic, I believe quite fervently in the principles of free speech. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people online who don't understand what free speech is. For instance, on my Twitter, the way I deal with people who harass me is to retweet what they say, so all of my followers see it, and then I block them. And I liken it to shoving someone in a pit of crocodiles and then walking away without looking back. And also on Skepchick, I am not shy about banning people and deleting their comments if they are out of line, if they say horrible things, or if they just say really stupid things that bring down the tone of the conversation. And I often hear people crying, free speech, censorship. What they are confused about is the difference between your right to say something and my right to not listen to it, and my right to not give it a platform. So where I focus most of my energy is not on asking that these bullies not be allowed to say what they're saying legally, not be legally allowed to say what they're saying. What I advocate for is for all of us to band together as a community and turn our backs on them like Amish, you know, like Amish style. Stop listening to them, stop giving them your attention, stop giving them a platform. Raise the social cost of saying misogynistic, racist, bigoted things. To do that, you simply call it out when you see it. You say, you know, what you just said was not funny and not cool, and here's why. And what these people learn is that they're no longer being rewarded for saying what they think are funny, witty, awesome things. Now they're being punished. They're being laughed at instead of having their buddies laugh with them. So I think that there are highly effective ways to combat harassment like that without making new laws to lock people up for what they're saying. That said, I have two folders. One is on my computer desktop. One is rape threats, and the other one is credible rape threats. Because there is a difference, and I recognize that a lot of what I get are what I call keyboard cowboys, you know, just idiots at home on their computer saying, oh, I'm going to teach this woman a lesson. You know, and I know that they're not actually going to come try to rape me. However, there have been several where I'm like, oh, okay, that's the sort of thing you see on the local news after someone shoots up, you know, a park. You know, they read out this man's postings and say, why didn't we see this coming? You know, so I've gotten a few of those, and those are the ones I go to the FBI with now. So things that are credible and actually focus on violence toward me, those are illegal, and I agree with them being illegal. Yeah. The problem, though, of course, is the reaction of law enforcement. Most women get turned away, get laughed at, get laughed off. It's just the internet, you know, until something happens. So there are huge problems to surmount there. In the back, yes.
Is there or should there be a catalog for the purpose of knowing how these threats are being discarded, and then those that actually have come true, like the CSI, I guess, a Law and Order episode you talked about, there's obviously plenty of times where these threats did lead up to an act, whether it be rape or other forms of violence against women or men for that matter. Is there a catalog of those so that we can say, this isn't just a one-off event?
He's asking if there's a catalog, for those who didn't hear, if there's a catalog of those sorts of threats and things where the person did end up following through on threats, something that we can point to as an example. If you go to the Southern Poverty Law Center's website, they're very good at documenting threats and people who follow through on those threats. And they've done an entire issue on the men's rights movement, in which they pulled out violent threats that were posted online on their forums and their websites, and compared that with violence that's been committed by men's rights activists in the last couple of years, of which there's been a disturbing amount of men murdering women, stalking and harassing feminists, and even trying to murder court judges who they think are trying to take possession of their children. At which point, you kind of see the judge's point. So yeah, I'd suggest the Southern Poverty Law Center for information like that. They do a very good job of documenting those sorts of threats and actions. Yes, Green.
I feel a little ignorant this morning because I was not aware that there was this kind of thing from the humanist side of the street. Is there a difference in the types of threats that you get from what ought to be the good guys as compared to the types that you get from the sort of normal rigmarole off the street?
Yeah, he's asking if I notice a difference between the type of threats I get from the quote-unquote good guys, the humanists and whatnot, and the hoi polloi. That's been the most terrifying thing because, at the beginning, I would occasionally get these threats from, like I say, Christians, Muslims, chiropractors, 9/11 truthers, things like that. And those were just like water off a duck's back. Because in my head, they were them, and we were us, and we had a strong community, and I had a lot of backing support, and I had a community that I felt safe and protected in. Until all of these threats started coming from the quote-unquote good guys. Allow me to butcher Solzhenitsyn. Something along the lines of the line between good and evil. How nice it would be to separate the good from evil, but the line between good and evil cuts through the heart of every man, and who would cut out a piece of his own heart? What I learned was that there is no us and there is no them. There is no safe community for me as a woman, as a mouthy woman. And that's what made the threats hurt so much more deeply when they came from people who called themselves humanists or called themselves even skeptics or atheists. It hurt very much. And it took me a long time to deal with this fact that just because someone identifies as humanist, it doesn't mean that they share my values, and it doesn't mean that I'm safe in their presence. It's a tough lesson to learn, but I think it was an important one for me. Yes, right here.
What percentage of your responses are threats?
What percentage of the responses are threats? Wow. That's really tricky because it's like, imagine your sewer line explodes and someone asks you what percentage are solid pieces of Ecomat. I'm sorry, wow, it's really good I didn't do this talk during dinner. Metaphor's never been my strong point. I couldn't tell you. I can tell you that I get an average of several threats a day. Credible threats are rarer. There have only been a few credible threats in the last 2 years. But yeah, mostly, if you're interested, I started a page o' hate on Skeptic. It's at skeptic.org/page-o-hate. And because I had this file on my desktop of screenshots of the things people say to me, and people have repeatedly asked for it. They want to see it. Sometimes because they don't believe me, and sometimes because they want to make a point to others, like, look what is happening. So I decided to finally just start putting them online, but the problem is there's so many. Like, I started categorizing them. There are threats, there are misogynistic slurs, there's the whole section is just one stalker sending me message after message after message. And then there's a bunch of uncategorized nonsense. So if you're interested, you can look at those and sort of get an idea of what percentage are actual threats. Although I don't have the credible threats on that page because I don't want to inhibit any ongoing police investigations. Yes?
Yeah, well, you know, we got the First Amendment, which we want to keep and have it, but let any jackass say anything he wants and cause a lot of trouble. Which leads me to this question. I don't know too much about blogging on the internet, but the little I've done, like where you read an article, it'll be a scientific article, believe it or not. And right away, you ought to see how nasty it gets. You don't quite, there's something about the internet, I wonder. It just brings out all the jerks. They're free to speak, vicious, no good.
Yeah,
They wouldn't say it to your face, you see.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's something that's just an element that brings all this out.
Yeah, did everybody hear that? I assume you did, since you're all anonymity. Yes, I agree with you. That's what we call the bottom of the internet. Never scroll down to it. Just
Pull out that jerky stuff.
You're right, and there have been actually several scientific studies that have looked at how computers allow us to dehumanize a person that we're interacting with. And so, to me, there's another metaphor coming. Everybody duck and cover. To me, it's a bit like alcohol, where alcohol doesn't make you an asshole, it just brings out the asshole inside of you. And I think that the internet does that. You know, I think the internet is exposing the horrific asshole inside a large number of people. And that's why I think the solution to that, unfortunately I don't have all the answers, and this probably isn't the best solution, but it's the best one I've come up with so far, is moderation. Moderating the comments. If you have a blog, don't let the assholes post. Just delete. There have been some blogs with really fun solutions like devoweling, which allows the comment to stay but takes away all the vowels. It's just like a plugin you can get. It doesn't just click on the comment and all the vowels are gone. And so then a normal person scrolling through, instead of seeing this idiotic comment, they just see this jumble of letters. And it's infuriating for the person who wrote it. And it's a bit of corrective, reward and punishment, They're like, oh, okay, eventually they start to learn. I behaved like a jackass, now everyone's laughing at me. I won't do that again.
Why not remove the consonants? You wouldn't know a damn thing.
Yeah, and then just put like a post. This article. How are we doing on time? We got time for some more? Yeah, hang on, I'm in the middle there.
I believe you said that it was Richard Dawkins felt you had no right to say what you were saying. Is that still his opinion or the opinion of other people in the community?
As far as I know, yes. I've tried to open up lines of communication with Richard Dawkins, and he has not been forthcoming. Every time I see him at an event, I get this face, which I assume means like I just don't want to talk to you. As far as I know, he still finds the concerns that I have and that other women have in this community, he finds them to be not worth worrying about, not worth listening to. Sorry?
That recent tweet
He's been very passive-aggressive on Twitter, yeah. He criticized, one woman from Skeptic runs a program called Hug Me, I'm Vaccinated. A few years ago on Skeptic, we were actually getting tired of people constantly calling us sluts and things. And so we sat down and we looked at ways that we could actively make a difference in people's lives in the most direct way possible. And one of those things we identified was vaccines. So we started setting up vaccination clinics at events like this. And also, Elise, one of the mothers on my team, started Hug Me I'm Vaccinated, which is a program to encourage parents to learn more about the safety and efficacy of vaccines and to get their children vaccinated. And Richard Dawkins tweeted something about how you shouldn't hug people because that's harassment. And he got destroyed on Twitter. I didn't say a word to him, I just thought it was very funny. Because people are like, are you saying that we shouldn't support a vaccine program for babies? And he was like, oh, no, I wouldn't say that.
There was another tweet he just retweeted also about a passive-aggressive tweet towards women, and it was very disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing was hugely disappointing for me because I was, I had all of Richard Dawkins' books. I really admired him as an outspoken atheist. I disagreed with him on some things, but, never to the point where I would ever be as horribly rude as he's been to me. So yeah, it was very disappointing as somebody that I had looked up to for so long be so petty and horrible, especially about a topic that is so personal to me, obviously. So, yeah. Yes.
Now, I like what you're saying about social justice, but just as a sociological comment, I mean, you're talking about things that happen to women, terrible things, and the only questions we're getting from this audience are from men.
I noticed that as well. Did you see that? There was a study recently that showed how little women speak when men are around and when men dominate the conversation, and it's really not now, lady. I'm kidding. Oh, all right. Yeah, I like you. All right.
We do apologize.
It was very funny because I had my hand up before he did, and my question was about Richard Dawkins. So
that was my fault. I didn't even see. Sorry about that.
I know, I'm very short. And it's hard, but I would like to know, how did you respond? What did you say to him that he could be that misogynist? It upsets me because I always thought highly of Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, are you asking what is the original thing I said that caused him to, okay. So I was I'll try to make this short. I was at a conference in Dublin where I was on a panel with Richard Dawkins. The topic was being an atheist online, and I decided to talk about what it's like to be an atheist woman online, and I gave it a quick overview of a lot of the harassment I had received up until that point. And later on, I was at the bar, as one does at things like this, and stayed there until about 4 in the morning. Talking with a group of atheists, mostly about this topic, about women in the community, respecting women in the community, things like that. It was a fantastic group, great conversation. And at about 4 a.m., I excused myself and said I was exhausted. Whole day of conference left the next day, so I was retiring to bed. And as I went to the elevator, a man who was on the edges of the group but hadn't actually been contributing to the conversation at all called up to me at the elevator and got on the elevator with me. And as the doors closed, he said, don't take this the wrong way. I find you very interesting. Would you like to come back to my hotel room for coffee? And I was like, no. And I got off the elevator, went to bed. And when I got home after the conference, I was doing a YouTube video where I discussed all of the awesome things that happened on this trip to Dublin. And then at the end, I described what happened with this man in just the way I described it to you. And I said, guys, don't do that. That's what Ellen Beth meant by guys don't do that. That's what I said. Meaning, after an entire day of a woman talking to you about respecting women at conferences and how she's tired of being sexualized and hit on and also getting these rape threats and things, don't ignore her interest in going to bed in order to come proposition her to go back to your hotel. So I chose that. Things like this happen to me all the time at conferences. And I chose that one because it was so obvious. That was such an obviously boneheaded thing to do. So I thought this will make a really good example and I can show otherwise well-meaning men who might not realize, don't do this. And the response I got was, you know, rape threats and death threats and things like that. And Richard Dawkins left a comment on P.Z. Meyer's blog, and the comment was a faux letter to a Muslim woman telling her to quit complaining about being genitally mutilated, because have you heard, there's this girl in the US and she got hit on, and oh no. So yeah, there are a lot of problems with that comment. Childish, slightly racist, and outrageously misogynistic in my viewpoint.
Very dismissive.
Yeah.
You know, there is a point of view there on the other side, frankly. You know, it gets to the point. You know, the old, I mean, nobody's more pro-women than mine. You see her right here.
She looks like she's about to slap.
I personally think, honest and truly, I mean this sincerely, women are better than men. I really believe that from the bottom of my heart.
I actually disagree.
I really do. However, the normal thing, I'm not saying in that case. There is a case where, so you don't understand, you need to understand men, they're sexual sons of bitches, and they're always looking out for those. So you just, but you say, no, thank you. That wasn't, I don't think, I wouldn't make a thing out of what you did.
Well, that's because
but
you've
you
never
can't
been
carry that
groped.
too far. Pretty soon,
Sir,
there
how
won't
often,
be any sex
sir,
left in the world. You
how
see?
often do you get groped at conferences like this?
Pardon me?
How often do you get groped at conferences like this?
Gross.
Gross. How often does someone grab your testicles?
No, I didn't talk about that.
No.
I'm talking about a flight.
No, just try to listen to me for a sec. What I'm trying to explain to you is that my experience as a woman in this community has been one of being groped at conferences like this, at conferences that I'm speaking at being propositioned constantly, at being sexualized, at getting grotesquely obscene emails.
Not a humanist, so.
Yes.
Excuse me.
Yes, at a humanist conference.
Sir.
So no, I mean it's fine. It's good. It's a learning experience because these are attitudes that I have to face every day of mostly men, but also some women who just cannot comprehend what life is like as a woman who is constantly hit on, who doesn't have privacy, who doesn't have control over her own body 24 hours a day. That's something that most men, and also many women, don't actually have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and they don't understand. The good news has been that there have been many other men who have come to me and said, you know what, I never thought about it from that perspective before, and you've completely changed the way I look at the world. And it helps them be more compassionate toward women who are in that circumstance. There's a lady just behind, yes, and then I'll get to you.
I'm thinking that a great many men may not understand what it's like to be in a position of always being possibly a target. And that is what we live with. And therefore, if you are in the setting of an elevator, closed, with one person who is probably bigger and stronger than you are, that is not the time to make any proposition of any kind.
Yeah, and it's a very good point. For those who didn't hear, she's saying that a lot of men don't understand what it's like to be a woman and to constantly be seen as a target and to always have to, for instance, it's related to something online called Schrodinger's Rapist, which was this fantastic essay by a woman in which she was describing what it's like to be a woman and always have to wonder, is this the man that's going to rape me? You don't know, and so you have to evaluate situations in a way that many men do not have to evaluate those situations. And unfortunately, there are a number of men who can't put themselves in women's shoes in that regard. So we had one question here, and then I'll get over to you.
Okay, I just wanted to say that this reminds me so much of white privilege, where white people do not even realize how they're behaving towards African Americans.
Yeah.
And this was an example. They really mean well, but they don't understand.
Right. What she was saying is that this sounds a lot like white privilege. It is. You know, it's male privilege. Privilege is a concept that is well known amongst feminist circles, but not necessarily as well known in humanist and skeptic and atheist circles. And it's becoming known because we've been having this discussion for so long now. But I think it's an important concept that people need to learn about. And it's something that I hadn't really considered until the past couple of years, when it occurred to me that I had tremendous white privilege. And having that realization has helped me immeasurably to relate to people who are different from me, to acknowledge also that I have a certain degree of able-bodied privilege, which is something that a lot of people don't even take into consideration. We are all temporarily abled, for the most part, in this community. So yeah, there are a lot of issues of privilege that I'm actually quite glad are starting to be explored in this community.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a personal story. My husband, 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, it was prior to Elevator Gate. He had gone up to Cleveland to visit his mother and stayed at a hotel. He came home, I went up to do the same, she was ill. And he had told me I stayed at whatever the motel was. So I made a reservation, I go there, I pull in, and it turns out it's one of those motels with outside rooms, entries. And I'm driving around to find a parking spot where my room is, and I realize I have to go up these stairs to the second floor to get into my room. And there are some men hanging out just down the balcony area, and I'm like, I can't do this. They are watching me go into this room, and I'm sure they're lovely men, but not that sure. And I got in the car, and I went to the hotel, check-in. I checked out immediately, and I went to the Hampton Inn across the street, which was definitely more expensive. And I called my husband and said, what the hell were you thinking? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I explained it, and he was like, oh my God. It was like an epiphany to him. Yeah. And ever since then, he has been a feminist. He talks endlessly about male privilege at our skeptics meetings, because when all of this happened to you, we, at our local skeptics meetings, talked about it a lot. Yeah. And he was shocked. We were all shocked at how there were a couple members of our group whose wives and daughters attend this group, and they were like clueless and refused to be enlightened. And my husband, he's wonderful. He's a great guy, and we have 2 daughters. But it never dawned on him, in spite of all of that, until this instance happened.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. I think it's important to distinguish between people who don't know what a lot of women have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and those who don't know and when they hear, dismiss. Those are the people that are the problem, not the people who just don't know. Because those people, especially now that this conversation has been happening, those people are hearing this and they're getting it, and it's great because they become allies, and we need that. And for the most part, my experience has been those people have been the majority. And so one thing I also just want to put out there, it's something that I've had to deal with over and over and over and over again, but I just want to make sure it's crystal clear. I am not outlawing sex. That is something that some people just don't really get. What I'm talking about is consent and context. I think that events and conferences are great places to meet new people, including new romantic partners, to put it romantically. I think they're great places for that. I just think that you should maybe exchange several words with a person before ignoring their stated interests and propositioning them in an uncomfortable way. So could we do 2 more? Because there's 2 ladies right here. Okay, so I think you in the purple were maybe, and then you.
Well, one thing we talked about in our group, and I do want to commend you for being willing to withstand the storm, because it has created a lot of dialogue. kind of have this superiority sense that we're better than a lot of this, you know, because we're intellectuals and we think things through and we're rationally, you know, rationally minded. And, you know, I think some of the blind spots that we've come up against with this dialogue have been really important to talk about. But, you know, what I think is the misconception part of it is that there's an imbalance of power and control in these situations. And it's not about just presenting yourself as available and being able to take an opportunity to have contact with person on equal footing. It's about whether you have a sense of being in power and control of your situation. And when you were in that place by yourself, there was an imbalance of power and control. And that's when harassment happens. And that's when it's not okay. And I think it's really important to point that out because that is what makes the difference between just a proposition that you're on equal footing and you can refuse or accept, you know, and that's just humanity, or you're being harassed and put in a place of discomfort. And I think it's really important to qualify that and to understand that, and that women do experience that a lot more often.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point, and sorry for those who can't hear because we're running out of time, but just basically talking about how power and control are crucial to understand whether or not something could be harassment or is discussion on equal footing between two people. So very good point, very well put. Okay, so last one.
Okay, I'm 72 and you're 30-something.
32.
So there's about 40 years difference between the two of us.
Good man.
And I've had a bit of a problem connecting with some of the things you're experiencing. And I'm thinking back at being 72, my memory's not the best, but I can't really remember ever being groped before. I know that. I'm glad too, but I know there were several situations where I got myself into situations where it was sort of scary, and it was my own fault that I maybe one too many glasses of wine, whatever. But what I'm leading up to is, has there been that much of a change in our culture that people, women of your age, are being groped all the time? And I somehow got to age 72 without being groped.
This is something that I brought up.
I was in the business world. I wasn't.
Yeah, this is something that I brought up earlier, which is the idea that, you know, there are many men and also many women who don't deal with the problems that many women deal with. And I don't think it's a difference between age. I think that 40 years ago, I think that women were being groped just as often then, if not more often, than they're being groped now. And also, I just want to say that it makes me so sad to hear a woman say that she put herself in a position where she could be groped or could be harassed or raped. Because that's victim blaming, and we shouldn't do it, we especially shouldn't do it to ourselves. That's something that men usually don't have to deal with for the most part. If a man gets robbed, you know, he doesn't get grilled on what he was wearing and how much he had to drink. He isn't blamed for it. But when a woman is raped, that's what we focus on. What were you wearing? How many drinks did you have? Despite the fact that what a woman wears has absolutely no impact on her risk of being raped when we actually look at the statistics. So yeah, there are a number of problems there. But the biggest one, though, is simply the fact that, you know, I'm really so glad that you've never had that situation. However, the fact that you never had that situation doesn't mean that there aren't many other women who have. And for instance, when I first got started in this community, I had no problem going to pubs that were full of men, all men, 100% men except for me. No problem at all. I'm loud, I can take care of myself, men don't scare me. And when I became more visible in the community, I would get letters from women who would say, you know, I tried to go to my local Skeptics in the Pub event or whatever, and I got there and it was all men and I felt really uncomfortable. What do I do? And my initial reaction was, suck it up. Like, they're just men, come on. But then I didn't say that because I noticed I was getting a lot of emails like that from a lot of women who were having problems, and a lot of women who, for instance, would go to these events, have to reject 10 different guys in a night, and then come back next week and see them all again, and it was really horribly awkward for them. So I would hear this from these women, and it wasn't my experience, but I thought it was important to not dismiss their experience simply because I did not personally have the same experience. So what I did was, instead I encouraged my own skeptics in the pub to more actively court women, put more women up on stage, make women feel more comfortable. We had more events outside the pub, like Skeptics in the Park, Skeptics in the Museum. Now there's a book club at the Boston Skeptics, and they've increased the number of women who now feel comfortable being there. So even though I'm perfectly comfortable being in a pub full of men, I recognize that there are many women who have had different experiences than I've had. And now I'm in their position. Now I know exactly how they feel, because I'm experiencing something that most women, God, I hope, in this community don't get, which is this complete avalanche of rape threats and also come-ons and sexual fantasies being emailed to me and being groped, things like that. And I'm very grateful to the people who, despite not experiencing those things themselves, can listen to my story, recognize that that's utter bullshit, and work to change things within our communities, make them better for me and for other women. So I hope that answers the question, and I guess we're out of time right now, but I just want to thank Ellen Beth and the whole Florida Humanists for having me here. This has been really fun. Thank you.
Well, if that doesn't shake you up and wake you up, I don't know what will. This is what we're dealing with in our movement and our community today. And yes, these are self-proclaimed atheists, self-professed humanists that are doing this. We need to address this problem. We need to tackle this. This is not acceptable to be doing this to each other. This is a severe problem. When Rebecca notified Mark and I that her stalker was a local, you can be damn sure that I was not going to allow him to attend this conference. I was going to make sure that this woman felt safe to attend. I'm dealing with my own stalker. I know how it feels. We need to support each other. We need to make each other feel safe. This is paramount in this community. We're supposed to be humanists.